On a humid September morning in 2017, in a small parish tucked along the winding banks of the Atchafalaya Basin in southern Louisiana, a woman named Jennifer Broussard walked into the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office and said 5 words that would crack open a case that had haunted investigators for nearly 3 years. She said, "I need to tell the truth." What she revealed that day would lead authorities back to a vanished soul, a carefully constructed story, and a question that had lingered in whispers through moss-draped streets since the autumn of 2014. Where was Michael Thibodeaux, and what really happened on the night he disappeared? St. Martin Parish sits in the heart of Cajun country, where the land seems to exhale moisture, and the air carries the scent of crawfish boils and sweet olive blossoms. The town of Bridge, population barely 8,000, stretches along Bayou with storefronts painted in fading pastels, and live oaks, so old their branches form tunnels over cracked sidewalks. It is the kind of place where everyone knows your family name going back 5 generations, where Sunday Mass at St. Bernard Catholic Church fills every pew, and where secrets have a way of settling into the damp earth like morning fog. In 2014, this was a community built on tradition, kinship, and an unspoken agreement that what happened behind closed doors stayed there. Michael Thibodeaux was 34 years old that autumn, a mechanic who worked at his uncle's auto shop on the edge of town near the Evangeline Parish line. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighed approximately 170 pounds, and had the calloused hands of someone who spent his days beneath the hoods of pickup trucks and fishing boats. Those who knew him said Michael was quiet, the kind of man who spoke only when necessary, who preferred the company of engines to people. He lived in a modest single-story house on Cypress Grove Road with his wife, Jennifer, age 29, and her 2 children from a previous relationship. The children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5, called him by his first name. The house sat at the end of a gravel drive beneath a canopy of cypress trees, its white paint peeling in strips, a tire swing hanging motionless from a thick branch in the front yard. The morning of October 16, 2014, began like most others in that household. Michael woke before dawn, made coffee in the small kitchen where linoleum curled at the corners, and drove his 2006 Ford F-150 to the shop by 6:30 in the morning. The sky held that particular quality of light that comes before autumn fully settles in the south, still warm but touched with the promise of cooler air. Jennifer drove the children to school at Bridge Elementary, returned home, and according to what she would later tell investigators, spent the day cleaning the house and preparing dinner. The boy had a soccer game that evening. The girl had dance practice the following afternoon. Life moved in its ordinary rhythms. Michael left work at 5:15 that evening. His uncle, Raymond Thibodeaux, would later tell deputies that Michael seemed no different than usual, that he mentioned stopping by the house to shower before heading out to meet a friend. Raymond asked who the friend was. Michael said he could not remember the name, someone from high school who had messaged him on social media. Raymond thought nothing of it then. Why would he? At 6:45 that evening, Jennifer called Michael's cell phone 3 times in succession. No answer. At 7:30, she called Raymond. She asked if Michael was still at the shop. Raymond said no, that he had left more than 2 hours earlier. Jennifer said Michael was supposed to be home by 6:30, that dinner was getting cold, that this was not like him. Raymond suggested maybe he stopped for a drink, maybe his phone died. Jennifer said maybe. She did not call the authorities that night. The next morning, October 17th, Michael's truck was found parked at the Crawfish Landing Boat Launch on Henderson Levee Road, approximately 14 miles from his home. The keys were in the ignition. His wallet sat on the passenger seat, containing his driver's license, $63 in cash, and a photograph of Jennifer on their wedding day 3 years prior. His cell phone was never recovered. A fisherman named Earl Guidry discovered the truck at dawn when he arrived to put his boat in the water. He noticed it because trucks did not typically sit overnight at that particular launch, which was known more for day use than serious fishing. Earl peered through the window, saw the keys, and drove to the nearest gas station to call the sheriff's office. Deputy Marcus LeBlanc arrived at 7:22 that morning. He documented the scene with photographs, noted the odometer reading, checked the truck bed, which was empty save for a coil of rope and a blue tarp. He ran the plates and within minutes had Jennifer on the phone. She arrived at the scene within 30 minutes, her face pale, her hands shaking as she gripped the door frame of the truck. She told Deputy LeBlanc that Michael had not come home the night before, that she had assumed he stayed with a friend, that she was about to file a report. Deputy LeBlanc asked what friend. Jennifer said she did not know. Michael had mentioned meeting someone but never said who. The search began immediately. Sent. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office deployed dive teams into the murky waters of the Atchafalaya Basin, where visibility drops to mere inches beneath the surface and cypress knees, jut like broken teeth from the mud. Volunteers from the community formed lines and walked through the dense undergrowth along the levee, calling Michael's name into the humid air that swallowed sound. Helicopters from the Louisiana State Police swept overhead, their rotors beating against the sky. The local television stations sent reporters who stood before the cameras and spoke of tragedy and mystery, of a man who seemed to vanish into the swamp as if the land itself had claimed him. Jennifer appeared at a press conference 3 days after the truck was found. She wore a black shirt and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. She said Michael was a good person, that he loved his family, that he would never just leave. She begged anyone with information to come forward. She wiped tears from her eyes with a crumpled tissue. The cameras captured every moment. The community rallied around her. Church groups organized meal trains. Neighbors offered to watch the children. A reward fund was established. But within the sheriff's office, questions had already begun to surface. Investigators noted inconsistencies in Jennifer's timeline. She claimed Michael left work at 5:15 and was supposed to be home by 6:30. Yet the distance from the auto shop to their house on Cypress Grove Road was only 8 miles. A 12-minute drive. Where had Michael been for over an hour? Jennifer suggested he might have stopped somewhere, though she could not say where. Deputies checked local bars, gas stations, fast food restaurants. No one had seen him. The boat launch where the truck was found presented another puzzle. Why would Michael drive 14 miles in the opposite direction of home to meet a friend? Why park at a boat launch when he did not own a boat and had shown no recent interest in fishing? Investigators pulled Michael's social media records with Jennifer's permission. They found no messages about meeting anyone that evening. His last post was from 2 weeks earlier, a photograph of a sunset over the bayou with no caption. Those who knew him said Michael was not the type to disappear without warning. He showed up for work every day. He paid his bills on time. He attended the children's school events with Jennifer. But they also said something else, something quieter, mentioned only in careful tones. They said Michael had seemed tired in recent months, that his marriage appeared strained, that he and Jennifer argued more often than they used to. One coworker mentioned seeing a bruise on Michael's forearm in late September. When asked about it, Michael said he had slipped while working under a car. The coworker did not press further. Deputies conducted multiple interviews with Jennifer in the days following the disappearance. She remained consistent in her basic account but vague on details. She said Michael left for work that morning as usual. She said he called her around 3 in the afternoon to say he would be home for dinner. She said when he did not arrive, She assumed he had made other plans and forgotten to tell her. When pressed on why she did not seem more concerned that first night, Jennifer explained that Michael sometimes needed space, that he would occasionally drive around to clear his head. Deputies noted her calm demeanor during these interviews, the lack of visible distress that families typically displayed in such circumstances. On October 23rd, exactly 1 week after Michael's disappearance, a cadaver dog was brought to the property on Cypress Grove Road. The dog alerted near a storage shed behind the house, a weathered structure with a corrugated metal roof and walls made of salvaged plywood. Deputies obtained a search warrant. Inside the shed they found typical storage items: old tires, paint cans, a lawn mower, fishing gear, boxes of Christmas decorations. They also found a freshly disturbed area of dirt floor in the back corner, approximately 3 feet by 6 feet. The soil had been turned recently, loose and darker than the packed earth surrounding it. Deputies brought in ground-penetrating radar equipment. The results showed a disturbance in the soil consistent with digging, but no human remains. They excavated the area by hand, sifting through each shovelful. They found nothing. Jennifer watched from the back porch, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When asked about the disturbed earth, she said Michael had been planning to install a workbench and had started leveling the ground before abandoning the project. Deputies noted this explanation. They photographed the shed from every angle. They collected soil samples that would later reveal nothing of evidential value. The weeks became months. The dive team suspended their search as winter approached, and the water grew too cold and dangerous. The volunteer searches dwindled as people returned to their lives, their initial urgency fading into resignation. The media moved on to other stories. Michael's face appeared on missing person flyers stapled to telephone poles and taped to store windows, his image slowly bleaching in the sun until his features became ghostly and indistinct. The reward fund grew to $12,000, then stopped. No credible tips emerged. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about the case. Something felt wrong, though they could not articulate exactly what. The pieces did not fit together cleanly. The abandoned truck with the keys in the ignition, the lack of any evidence of foul play. Jennifer's composed demeanor, the disturbed earth that held no secrets, but without a body, without witnesses, without any concrete evidence of wrongdoing, the investigation stalled. The file remained open, but active work ceased. Michael Thibodeaux became one more name in a database of missing persons, one more face on a poster, one more story that ended without an ending. Clear's throat by spring of 2015, 6 months after Michael vanished. Jennifer and the children moved from the house on Cypress Grove Road to an apartment complex in Lafayette, 20 miles away. She told friends she could no longer bear living in the place where Michael had disappeared, that every room held too many memories, that the children needed a fresh start. The house sat empty for months, before eventually being sold to a couple from Baton Rouge who knew nothing of its history. The tire swing still hung from the cypress tree in the front yard, its rubber seat cracked and fading. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt that creeping uncertainty that something is not as it seems, the months after a disappearance carry a particular weight. Jennifer lived with this weight daily. She enrolled the children in new schools. She found work as a cashier at a grocery store. She attended counseling sessions provided by victim services. On the surface, she appeared to be a woman rebuilding her life after unimaginable loss. But beneath that surface, in the quiet moments late at night, something else stirred. The boy began having nightmares. He would wake screaming about the shed, about digging in the dark, about his mother telling him to be quiet and keep secrets. At first, Jennifer dismissed these as normal responses to trauma, the mind's way of processing grief and confusion. But the nightmares persisted, growing more specific with time. The girl, now 6 years old, began drawing pictures in school that concerned her teachers. In one drawing, a figure lay on the ground while another figure stood over it holding something red. When asked to explain the picture, the girl said it was from a movie she had seen. The teacher noted the incident but did not report it. Jennifer's relationship with a new partner began that summer. His name was Derek Landry, a construction worker she met through a friend. Derek knew about Michael, about the disappearance and the investigation that had gone nowhere. He seemed unfazed by it. They moved quickly, too quickly perhaps, and by autumn Derek had moved into the Lafayette apartment. The children called him by his first name, just as they had called Michael. But the relationship showed cracks almost immediately. Derek would later tell investigators that Jennifer drank heavily in private, that she became paranoid about phone calls and visitors, that she insisted on keeping the blinds drawn even during the day. He said she talked in her sleep sometimes, saying things that made no sense, fragments about the shed and the bayou and being careful. When he asked her about it in the morning, she claimed not to remember. Derek stayed for 8 months before moving out in May of 2016, citing irreconcilable differences. He did not speak to authorities at that time, believing his concerns were not his business to share. The boy's nightmares intensified after Derek left. Now 9 years old, he began to tell more detailed stories to his school counselor about the night Michael disappeared. He said his mother had come into his room late that evening and told him to stay in bed no matter what he heard. He said he heard shouting from outside, then a loud bang that might have been a car backfiring or might have been something else. He said the next morning his mother had made him help carry something heavy wrapped in the blue tarp to the shed. When the counselor asked what was in the tarp, the boy became quiet and would not answer. The counselor documented these sessions but, bound by confidentiality and uncertain whether the stories were real memories or trauma-induced fantasies, did not immediately contact authorities. For those who have noticed the way guilt manifests in the body, the way it curves shoulders inward and shadows eyes, Jennifer showed these signs increasingly as 2017 approached. She lost weight. She stopped attending social gatherings. She called in sick to work with growing frequency. Her mother, who lived in Morgan City, tried to convince her to seek additional counseling, to perhaps consider medication for anxiety. Jennifer refused. She said she was fine, just tired, just trying to keep everything together for the children. The breaking point came in August of 2017, nearly 3 years after Michael's disappearance. Jennifer's mother kept the children for a weekend, while Jennifer supposedly attended a friend's wedding in Texas. Instead, Jennifer checked into a motel on the outskirts of Lafayette and spent 2 days alone with a bottle of whiskey and the weight of what she knew. On Sunday evening, she returned to pick up the children. Her mother immediately saw that something was wrong. Jennifer's hands trembled. Her eyes were red and swollen. When pressed, Jennifer broke down completely. She said she could not carry it anymore, that it was destroying her, that she needed to tell the truth before it killed her too. Her mother urged her to go to the police. Jennifer said she would, but not yet. She needed time to figure out how to say it. 2 weeks passed. The children returned to school. Jennifer went back to work, but something had shifted irrevocably. The boy's counselor, after another disturbing session in which the 9-year-old described in detail what he claimed to remember about helping his mother in the shed, finally made the decision to contact Child Protective Services. A report was filed. CPS contacted the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office. The case file on Michael Thibodeaux was pulled from the archives. Clears throat on September 7, 2017, Detective Sarah Fontenot of the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office received a call from the Lafayette Office of Child Protective Services regarding potential historical information, related to the Thibodeaux disappearance. Detective Fontenot had not worked the original case, but was familiar with the file, as all deputies in the parish were familiar with the case that had never been solved. She drove to Lafayette that afternoon and met with the CPS worker and the boys' school counselor. She listened to recordings of the counseling sessions. She read the notes describing the nightmares and the drawings, and the fragments of memory that had emerged over 3 years. What the boy described, in halting sentences interrupted by long silences, was this. On the night of October 16, 2014, he heard his mother and Michael arguing in the backyard. He heard Michael say he was leaving, that he could not do this anymore. He heard his mother say something he could not make out. Then he heard a sound like a firecracker, sharp and final. He pulled his blanket over his head and tried to go back to sleep. Later, his mother came into his room and told him to get up and help her. She said they had to move something before morning. She said he must never tell anyone, that it was very important, that bad things would happen if he told. The boy said he helped his mother drag something heavy wrapped in the blue tarp from the backyard to the shed. He said his mother dug a hole inside the shed while he held a flashlight. He said it took a long time. He said his mother kept crying and digging. He said when the hole was deep enough, they pushed the tarp into it and covered it with dirt. He said his mother made him promise again never to tell. He said he had nightmares about it ever since. Detective Fontenot took detailed notes. She knew that children's memories could be unreliable, particularly after trauma, that the line between reality and imagination could blur. But she also knew that the boy's account aligned with certain facts of the case. The blue tarp found in Michael's truck matched the description. The disturbed earth in the shed had been documented. The timeline fit. She requested permission to interview Jennifer Broussard. On September 12th, Detective Fontenot and another investigator arrived at Jennifer's apartment in Lafayette. Jennifer agreed to speak with them without an attorney present. She sat at her small kitchen table, her hands folded, her face carefully neutral. When asked about her son's statements to the school counselor, Jennifer initially denied everything. She said the boy was troubled, that he had difficulty separating reality from fantasy, that the disappearance had affected him deeply. The detectives listened. They did not press. They thanked her for her time and left. 4 days later, on September 16th, Jennifer walked into the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office without calling ahead. She asked to speak with Detective Fontenot. She was placed in an interview room with gray walls and a table bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner recorded everything. Jennifer sat down and said, "I need to tell the truth." What she revealed over the next 4 hours would confirm the worst suspicions that had lingered since the beginning. Jennifer stated that on the evening of October 16th, 2014, she and Michael had argued in the backyard of their home. She said Michael had been planning to leave her, that he had told her he was unhappy, that the marriage was a mistake. She said she became enraged. She said she went into the house and retrieved a weapon from a closet. She said she returned to the backyard and confronted Michael again. She said she did not remember pulling the trigger, that her memory of the actual moment was blank, that she only remembered Michael falling and blood spreading across the grass. She said she panicked. She said she wrapped Michael's body in the blue tarp from his truck bed. She said she woke her son because she could not move the body alone. She said they dragged it to the shed. She said she spent hours digging while her son held a flashlight and cried quietly. She said she placed Michael in the makeshift grave and covered him with earth. She said she then drove Michael's truck to the boat launch, wiped down the surfaces she thought might hold her fingerprints, left the keys in the ignition to suggest he had been meeting someone, and walked the 14 miles home in the dark, arriving just before dawn. Detective Fontenot asked why Jennifer had not left the wallet in the truck. Jennifer said she almost took it, but decided at the last moment that it would seem more believable if Michael appeared to have left willingly for a meeting. She said she thought the presence of the wallet would make it seem less like an intended disappearance. When asked why she was confessing now, Jennifer said she could not watch her son suffer anymore, that the guilt was destroying both of them. That she had initially thought she could live with what she had done, but realized over time that she could not. She said, "I need this to end. I need him to be able to heal." The interview concluded at 9:47 that evening. Jennifer Broussard was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. She was held without bond at the St. Martin Parish Detention Center. The following morning, September 17, 2017, exactly 3 years and 1 day after Michael's truck was found at the boat launch, investigators returned to the property on Cypress Grove Road with a new search warrant. The current owners, shocked and horrified, vacated the premises. A forensic team excavated the floor of the shed. At a depth of approximately 4 feet, beneath layers of compacted soil, they discovered human remains wrapped in deteriorated blue plastic. The remains were transported to the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab. Dental records confirmed the identity as Michael James Thibodeaux. The medical examiner determined cause of death as a gunshot wound to the chest. The weapon was never recovered. The news of the arrest spread through Breaux Bridge and the surrounding parishes like wildfire through dry grass. People who had searched for Michael, who had donated to the reward fund, who had attended the vigils, struggled to process the revelation. Those who had known Jennifer expressed disbelief. She had seemed so devastated, so convincing in her grief. Others said they had suspected all along, though few could articulate exactly what had raised their suspicions. The tire swing on Cypress Grove Road became a makeshift memorial, covered with flowers and teddy bears and handwritten notes. Television cameras returned, filming the shed where Michael had been hidden for 3 years, the ground that had kept it secret until a child's nightmares finally broke the silence. Michael's family, his mother and uncle and cousins, held a funeral service at St. Bernard Catholic Church in late September. The sanctuary filled with mourners who had waited 3 years to say goodbye. Raymond Thibodeaux spoke briefly, his voice breaking. He said Michael had been a good person who deserved better. He said he hoped his nephew could finally rest. He did not mention Jennifer's name. The trial was held in May of 2018. Jennifer pleaded guilty to manslaughter in a plea agreement that avoided a potential life sentence for second-degree murder. The prosecution argued that the killing was premeditated, evidenced by Jennifer's actions afterward, the elaborate staging at the boat launch, the coercion of her child into helping conceal the crime. The defense argued that Jennifer had acted in a moment of emotional distress, that she had immediately regretted her actions, that her eventual confession showed remorse and a desire for justice. The boy, now 10 years old, did not testify in court, though his recorded statements to investigators were entered into evidence. Experts testified about the psychological impact of forcing a child to participate in concealing such a crime. The judge considered all evidence, including Jennifer's confession and cooperation in recovering Michael's remains. On June 8, 2018, Jennifer Broussard was sentenced to 30 years in the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women, with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of the sentence. Those who believe in justice as a concrete concept found some measure of satisfaction in the outcome. Those who understood justice as something more complex, more elusive, recognized that no sentence could restore what was lost. Michael Thibodeaux would not return. The children would carry the weight of that October night for the rest of their lives. The community would remember how someone they trusted had stood before cameras and lied, had allowed volunteers to search waters and woods, while knowing exactly where the truth lay buried 4 feet deep beneath a shed floor. Clear's throat. In the years since the trial, the house on Cypress Grove Road changed hands twice more. The shed was demolished. New owners built a garden where it once stood. The tire swing was eventually cut down, replaced by a bird feeder that hangs from the same cypress branch. Life in Breaux Bridge continues in its rhythms, crawfish boils and Sunday Mass and moss-draped streets. But those who remember the case of Michael Thibodeaux speak of it still in careful tones, a reminder that the land keeps secrets until someone decides to tell them. That truth has a weight that grows heavier with time, and that sometimes the person you think you know is someone else entirely. The case serves as a stark illustration of how a single moment of violence can ripple outward, affecting not just the immediate victim but generations, communities, the very soil itself. Michael's mother visits his grave at St. Michael's Cemetery every Sunday after Mass. The headstone is simple gray granite with his name and dates and a single line beneath, "Gone but never forgotten." The children live with relatives now, receiving counseling and attempting to build lives separate from the shadow of that October night. Jennifer writes letters from prison, though it is unclear to whom or whether anyone reads them. Detective Fontenot kept the case file in her desk for months after the trial concluded. She would open it occasionally and read through the timeline, the inconsistencies that had been there from the beginning, the signs that everyone had seen but no one had fully understood. She wondered if they could have solved it sooner, if there was something they missed in those first crucial days. But she also recognized that without the child's testimony, without Jennifer's eventual confession, Michael might still be beneath that shed floor. His disappearance forever categorized as unexplained, his family forever waiting for answers that never came. For those who have ever waited for truth to surface, who have lived with unanswered questions that echo through empty rooms and sleepless nights, the resolution of the Michael Thibodeaux case offers both comfort and sorrow. Comfort in knowing that secrets rarely stay buried forever, that guilt manifests in ways that eventually demand reckoning. Sorrow in understanding the cost of that truth, the years lost, the innocence destroyed, the life that ended in a backyard argument and was hidden away as if it had never existed at all. The Atchafalaya Basin continues to flow as it always has, dark water moving through cypress forests, carrying sediment and secrets toward the Gulf. The swamp that investigators searched so thoroughly never held Michael at all. He was 40 yards from his own back door the entire time, beneath ground he had walked over every day, in a shed where he kept his tools and fishing gear and boxes of Christmas decorations. The irony is not lost on those who worked the case. They searched everywhere except the place that should have been obvious, trusting the word of someone who had everything to lose by telling the truth. This case reminds us that evil does not always announce itself with warning signs and clear intent. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. Sometimes it cries genuine tears for what it has done. Sometimes it lives in the house at the end of a gravel drive beneath cypress trees, where a tire swing hangs motionless and the grass grows thick over blood that has long since washed away. Sometimes the monster is not a stranger in the dark, but someone who knows where you keep your keys and how you take your coffee, and the exact weight of the guilt they carry. Michael Thibodeaux was 34 years old when he disappeared into a grave his wife dug for him. He was a quiet man who preferred engines to people, who showed up for work every day, who attended his stepchildren's school events and fixed neighbors' cars on weekends. He deserved more than a blue tarp and 4 feet of earth in a shed floor. He deserved more than 3 years of silence. He deserved justice, and eventually, through the courage of a child who could no longer carry his mother's secret, justice found him. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.